The old man squinted at the shooting range through thick glasses that magnified his pale blue eyes. At 74, with silver hair and a slight stoop to his shoulders, he looked more like someone's grandfather than a shooter. When he asked to observe the advanced sniper training course, the lead instructor, Staff Sergeant Kyle Morrison, barely glanced up from his clipboard. "Observation area is over there, Pops. Try not to get in the way of real shooters." What happened at the 2,000-meter line would become the most watched training video in military sniper history and teach everyone present why perfect vision isn't what makes a perfect shot. Fort Benning's Advanced Sniper School was conducting its quarterly long-range precision course. Elite marksmen from Army, Marines, and even some Allied forces had gathered for 5 days of intensive training on extreme distance shooting. The course culminated in a 2,000-meter challenge, over a mile away, that pushed both equipment and human capability to their limits. Into this world of cutting-edge optics, ballistic computers, and elite shooters walked Walt McKenzie, wearing civilian clothes and thick prescription glasses that screamed retirement home more than rifle range. But what was truly shocking was what those failing eyes had accomplished decades ago. Staff Sergeant Morrison was running the course with the intensity of someone who had something to prove. At 32, he was one of the youngest lead instructors in the program's history, a former Army Ranger sniper with multiple deployments and a reputation for being demanding, ambitious, and not particularly patient with anyone who didn't meet his standards. "Gentlemen," Morrison addressed the assembled snipers, "today you're going to attempt something that separates the good from the great. The 2,000-meter shot requires perfect conditions, perfect equipment, and perfect execution. Most of you will fail. That's not an insult. It's statistics." He noticed Walt standing near the firing line, peering downrange through his thick glasses. "Sir, I told you, observation area is back there," Morrison said, pointing with obvious irritation. "This is an active range. Safety protocols." Walt nodded slowly. "I understand, Sergeant. I was just trying to see the target. My eyes aren't what they used to be." One of the younger snipers, Corporal Chen, muttered to his buddy, "Dude can barely see 20 feet. What's he doing at a sniper range?" Morrison overheard and smirked. "Good question. Sir, with all respect, if you can't see the target board at 100 meters, you probably shouldn't be here. This is advanced precision shooting, not a museum tour. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet." Because what Walt was about to reveal would shock every sniper on that range. Walt reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From it, he extracted a faded military ID card and a letter with an official Department of Defense seal. "Sergeant Morrison, my name is Walter McKenzie. I was invited here by Colonel Patterson to observe your course and possibly provide some input if requested. Here's my authorization." Morrison took the documents, skepticism written across his face. He scanned the letter quickly, then did a double take and read it again more carefully. His expression shifted from dismissive to confused to slightly worried. This says you're a former military sniper instructor." "Sir, no offense, but you're wearing Coke bottle glasses. How could you have been a sniper?" Walt smiled patiently. "I wasn't wearing these glasses back then, son. Macular degeneration started about 10 years ago, but I see well enough with these." Another instructor, Master Sergeant Davis, had overheard and walked over. He took the ID card from Morrison, and his face went pale. "Holy shit," Davis whispered. "Morrison, do you know who this is?" "Some old instructor, apparently. Walter Ghost McKenzie. He held the record for longest confirmed kill for 15 years. He wrote half the manual we teach from. He trained the first generation of modern military snipers. The range went quiet. Every sniper had stopped what they were doing and was now staring. Morrison's face flushed red. "Sir, I didn't know. I apologize for—" But this was exactly when Morrison made his catastrophic mistake. Morrison's apology was interrupted by his ego. Even faced with Walt's credentials, he couldn't fully accept that this old man in thick glasses deserved to be there. "But sir, with all due respect," Morrison said, his tone shifting from apologetic to condescending. "Even if you were a great shooter back in your day, things have changed. We're using technology you probably can't even comprehend. Digital rangefinders, ballistic computers, advanced optics, and, well," he gestured to Walt's glasses, "you clearly have vision problems. I'm sure you were impressive in your time, but that time has passed. You're a has-been, a blind old has-been." The words hung in the air like a grenade waiting to explode. Master Sergeant Davis closed his eyes in second-hand embarrassment. Several snipers looked away, uncomfortable with Morrison's disrespect. Walt's expression didn't change. He simply nodded slowly. "I understand your perspective, Sergeant. You're right, I can't see like I used to. These glasses help, but I'll never have 20/20 vision again." Morrison, taking the response as validation, pressed on. "Exactly. So maybe you should just observe from back there and let the real shooters with actual working eyes do their job." "Real shooters," Walt repeated quietly. "May I ask you something, Sergeant?" "Sure." "What's the farthest confirmed kill you've made?" Morrison straightened proudly. 1,247 meters. Afghanistan, 2019. "Impressive," Walt said. "And you used a Barrett M82, correct? With a loopholed Mark IV scope and a ballistic computer." "Yes, sir. Top-of-the-line equipment. What you're seeing now is nothing." Because what Walt was about to propose would expose Morrison's arrogance in the most devastating way possible. Walt turned to look at the 2,000-meter target downrange, barely visible even with spotting scopes. "Sergeant Morrison, would you mind if I made a small demonstration? Not to prove anything, just to show these young snipers something they might find interesting." Morrison laughed, actually laughed. "Sir, you want to shoot? At 2,000 meters? With your eyes? If you'll permit it. This I gotta see." "Sure. Why not?" Morrison turned to the assembled snipers. "Gentlemen, we're about to witness a lesson in humility. Sometimes legends should stay retired." Davis stepped forward. "Morrison, I really think—" "It's fine, Davis. Let him try. Maybe it'll be educational for everyone about knowing your limitations." Walt walked to his old pickup truck parked nearby and returned carrying a weathered rifle case. The case itself looked like it had been through a war, which it had. When he opened it, Morrison actually scoffed. "Is that a fucking M40? From Vietnam?" "Close. M40A1. I had it custom maintained. She and I have some history." The rifle looked ancient compared to the modern precision weapons the other snipers were using. The scope was old, a fixed 10 by Unertl that had been state-of-the-art in 1970. Morrison couldn't contain himself. "Sir, that rifle is a museum piece. The scope alone is like 40 years old. You can't seriously expect to hit a 2,000-meter target with that and your vision." The truth was, Walt hadn't told them the most important thing about his shooting philosophy. Walt carefully loaded a single round into his rifle. His movements were slow, deliberate, but there was a practiced efficiency that decades couldn't erase. "Sergeant Morrison," Walt said quietly, You mentioned that I can't see like I used to. You're absolutely right. But let me ask you something. What percentage of shooting is about vision? Uh, most of it? You need to see the target. I need to know where the target is. That's different. But let me tell you what makes a shot at 2,000 meters. Wind reading, humidity, temperature, barometric pressure, Coriolis effect, bullet drop, and most importantly, mental discipline. Vision helps, but it's maybe 30% of the equation. He adjusted his position behind the rifle. Through his thick glasses, he peered through the old scope at the distant target. Morrison whispered to Chen, "This is going to be embarrassing. Old guy's going to miss by a mile and we'll have to pretend it was good." Walt spent 5 full minutes just observing, not looking through the scope, but watching the grass at various distances, feeling the wind on his face, noting how heat waves danced in the air. "Sergeant, what's the current wind speed?" Walt asked. According to the Kestrel meter, 8 miles per hour at 2 o'clock. That's here. What about at 500 meters? Morrison checked his computer. Shows 6 miles per hour, same direction. Wrong, Walt said calmly. Look at the grass between here and there. See how it's moving differently? Wind is gusting between 9 and 11, shifting between 1 and 3 o'clock. Your computer can't tell you that. Your eyes can. Actually, Morrison hadn't learned his biggest lesson yet, because what Walt was about to do would completely destroy his understanding of what makes a marksman. Walt continued his environmental assessment. Temperature is 87 degrees here, but you see that tree line at 800 meters? Creates a temperature differential of probably 4 to 5 degrees. Changes the air density, affects bullet flight. He pointed to distant hills. That terrain feature at 1,200 meters creates an updraft. Bullet will rise slightly there, then drop faster after. Morrison and the other snipers were now paying close attention. This wasn't just an old man rambling. This was environmental reading at a level most of them had never considered. Your ballistic computer, Walt said, gives you a starting point. But it can't account for all the variables that change second by second. That's where experience comes in. That's where 50 years of reading wind and terrain comes in. He settled behind his rifle, making minute adjustments to the scope. Through his thick glasses and through the old scope, he could barely make out the target as a tiny speck. Sergeant Morrison, I'm going to make this shot. Not because my eyes are better than yours. They're not. Not because my equipment is better. It's not. I'm going to make this shot because I've learned to see what matters, not just what's visible. Morrison's smirk had faded. Despite himself, he was intrigued. Walt controlled his breathing. His finger moved to the trigger with the muscle memory of thousands of shots. The range went completely silent. On my mark, Walt said. 3, 2, 1. The rifle cracked once. For nearly 3 seconds, everyone held their breath as the bullet flew over a mile to its target. Through the spotting scope, the range safety officer called out, "Impact! Dead center! Perfect bullseye!" The silence was absolute, then chaos. But Walt wasn't finished teaching them yet. Morrison stood frozen, his mouth actually open in shock. The other snipers erupted in amazed conversation. Davis was shaking his head with a knowing smile. Walt slowly stood up from his rifle, removed his thick glasses, and cleaned them with a cloth. Sergeant Morrison, would you like to know what the real difference is between a good shot and a great shot? Morrison couldn't speak. He just nodded. A good shot relies on equipment to compensate for skill. A great shot uses equipment to enhance skill. You called me a blind old has-been, And you were half right. I am old, and I can't see like I used to. But being a sniper was never about having perfect eyes. It's about having a perfect understanding of ballistics, environment, and yourself. He put his glasses back on. You made a 1,247-meter shot with a Barrett and a computer. That's impressive. But did you make that shot? Or did your equipment make it for you? Morrison's face had gone from red to pale. Sir, I'm sorry. I was completely out of line. You were. But you're young, and young people make mistakes. The question is, did you learn from this one? Walt turned to address all the assembled snipers. Gentlemen, I'm not here to show off or to embarrass anyone. I'm here because Colonel Patterson asked me to remind this class of something important. Technology evolves, but fundamentals are eternal. Your scopes will get better, your computers will get faster, but wind reading, environmental assessment, and mental discipline, those skills are timeless. He gestured to his old rifle. This weapon is older than most of you. The scope is primitive by your standards. But in the right hands, with the right knowledge, it's still deadly effective. Because the weapon doesn't make the sniper. The sniper makes the weapon. What happened next would change the entire sniper program. Colonel Patterson, who had been observing from the command tower, came down to the range. He'd watched the entire exchange, including Morrison's disrespectful comments. Sergeant Morrison, Patterson said, his voice cold. My office. Now. Morrison left, his career in serious jeopardy. Patterson turned to Walt. Mr. McKenzie, thank you for your patience with my instructor's ignorance. Would you be willing to stay for the week and teach these snipers what they clearly haven't learned? It would be my honor, Colonel. For the next 5 days, Walt McKenzie revolutionized how the Army trained long-range snipers. He taught classes on environmental reading that went far beyond what ballistic computers could calculate. He demonstrated wind assessment techniques that required no instruments. He shared knowledge that had been earned through decades of real-world shooting. The snipers learned that Walt's failing eyesight was actually compensated by other enhanced senses. His understanding of how wind felt on his skin, how temperature affected ballistics, how to read terrain features. All of this was so refined that he could make shots that younger snipers with perfect vision couldn't match. He taught them that shooting wasn't a technical skill. It was an art form that blended physics, environmental science, physiology, and psychology. One evening, Corporal Chen approached Walt privately. Sir, I have to ask, you made that 2,000-meter shot look easy. What was your longest confirmed kill? Walt was quiet for a moment. Son, the specific number isn't something I talk about. But I'll tell you this, my longest shot was 2,847 meters. In Vietnam, 1971. With a rifle not much different from the one you saw me use. No computer, no digital rangefinder, no laser. Just mathematics, experience, and a lot of practice. Chen's eyes widened. That was a world record. For a while. Someone broke it eventually. Records are made to be broken. But the principles that made that shot possible, those never change. The transformation in Morrison was perhaps most dramatic. Morrison's meeting with Colonel Patterson was brutal. He was stripped of his lead instructor position and placed on probation. But Patterson gave him one chance at redemption. Spend the next month learning from Walt McKenzie. Morrison, his ego shattered, approached Walt with genuine humility. Mr. McKenzie, I was wrong. About everything. I judged you by your age and your eyesight. and I dismissed decades of experience because I thought modern technology made you irrelevant. Walt put a hand on the younger man's shoulder. Sergeant, I'm not angry with you. I was you once. Young, confident, convinced that I knew everything. But here's the truth. Every generation of warriors thinks they've figured it all out. Then they meet someone from the previous generation and realize how much they still have to learn. Over the following weeks, Morrison became Walt's most dedicated student. He learned to read wind by watching grass and trees instead of relying on electronic meters. He practiced environmental assessment until he could feel temperature changes on his skin. He studied ballistics calculations until he could do them in his head faster than his computer could process them. Most importantly, he learned humility. 3 months later, Morrison attempted the 2,000-meter shot again. This time, he did it without his ballistic computer, using only the techniques Walt had taught him. He hit the bullseye. "How do you feel?" Walt asked him. "Like I finally understand what being a sniper really means," Morrison replied. "It's not about the equipment. It's about becoming one with the environment, the weapon, and the shot. Now you're learning." The program Walt helped create became known as Environmental Sniper Fundamentals. It was added to the curriculum at every military sniper school in the U.S. The course emphasized that while technology was valuable, the fundamentals of wind reading, environmental assessment, and mental discipline were irreplaceable. Walt continued teaching at various military bases for the next 3 years, until his eyesight deteriorated to the point where even his thick glasses couldn't compensate anymore. He was 77 when he took his last shot at a rifle range, a perfect bullseye at 1,000 meters. When he passed away at age 79, his funeral was attended by over 300 military snipers from around the world. Morrison was there, now a master sergeant and one of the most respected sniper instructors in the Army. At the service, Morrison spoke. "Walt McKenzie taught me that perfect vision doesn't make a perfect shot. Perfect understanding does. He couldn't see the target clearly at 2,000 meters, but he didn't need to. He saw the wind, the temperature, the terrain, the mathematics. He saw everything that mattered. And in doing so, he taught all of us to see beyond our scopes and trust our knowledge." Walt's old M40A1 rifle was donated to the Sniper School Museum, displayed with a plaque that read, "Used by Walter Ghost McKenzie to make a 2,000-meter shot at age 74, proving that experience and knowledge will always trump youth and technology." And at Fort Benning, they still tell the story of the blind old has-been who outshot every sniper on the range and reminded a new generation that some things, wind reading, environmental awareness, and mental discipline, can never be replaced by computers or perfect eyesight. The greatest lesson wasn't about shooting at all. It was about respect, humility, and understanding that every generation of warriors stands on the shoulders of those who came before. And sometimes, those shoulders belong to a 74-year-old man in thick glasses who can barely see the target, but never misses what truly matters.